Hello and welcome to another episode of our Brothers Creed podcast, where we talk about motivation, experiences, and exploring the world around us. I'm Jared.
I'm Ethan. And today we're going to be talking about kind of all three of those things mixed together, right? Motivation, experiences, not our experiences, but other people's experiences, and exploring what the world has to offer. So today is kind of focused around Memorial Day and really remembering our soldiers and veterans out there. What we're going to be talking about are American hero war stories. People that have gone above and beyond and sacrificing everything up to their lives, potentially, to save their fellow brethren. And so we have some stories that are really cool, some crazy stories. People, I mean, I don't even know how some of these people did some of these things, and just the motivation and the willpower to keep moving forward. So it's going to be a great episode. Hope you guys enjoy it.
Let's do it.
You can't climb the ladder of success with your hands in the pocket.
We will not go quietly into the night.
They tell me you're a man with true grit.
I am the one who knocks. Don't ever tell me what I can't do, ever!
That's how winning is done.
Okay, well, thanks for joining us today, guys. I'm very excited to have you on and super jazzed about this episode and remembering our fallen heroes as we, Memorial Day is not just about starting the summer. It's about remembering those who have gone before and the sacrifices that they've made for the freedoms that we enjoy every single day as Americans. So we have some great stories today. Each of us chose kind of one or two stories, and one of the ones I want to start out with today is something that that I've always admired, and it's one that kind of was immortalized in a movie that many of us were familiar with. The movie is Pearl Harbor.
Good movie.
And
long movie.
Such a crazy time where America was caught totally off guard, a surprise attack. Well, I guess you could debate that if you really dig in. Some people say that we actually knew about it, but we didn't think it was going to be that bad. But regardless, the soldiers were surprised. And there's one story that I find really inspiring and really cool about one guy, and his name is Doris Miller. Now, Doris Miller, he was an African-American, and at the time, really, he was he was a mess hall officer, and basically what that means, or not an officer, but he worked in the mess hall. He did laundry, and so on the morning of it was
December 7th,
1941, exactly. He was serving breakfast mess, and he was collecting laundry at 7:57 a.m. on the day of the attack, and he was aboard the battleship West Virginia when it was attacked by torpedoes at Pearl Harbor. And so he's just, going about doing his stuff. He's not really, I guess you could say, he's a soldier in the aspect that he's in the Navy, but he wasn't really doing soldierly things. He didn't have soldierly training. He was just doing, cleaning up and making the food and stuff like that and doing laundry. So the Japanese planes came in, torpedoed his ship, and he was in a situation where he had to act. And so he was with some of the commanding officers, and there's a Lieutenant Frederick H. White ordered Miller to help him with Ensign Victor Delano load an unmanned number 1 and number 2 Browning 50 caliber anti-aircraft machine gun on the aft of the conning tower. And now Doris Miller was not familiar with these guns because he'd never shot them. But White and Delano instructed him on how to operate it. And when Delano was expected Miller to feed the ammunition to one gun, he kind of turned his back, and then he looked back, and Doris Miller was there just firing away. And so he had jumped on the gun and was shooting the planes.
He was like,
I'm going to do this myself. And so I think that's kind of cool because that was outside of his scope of his comfort zone, and even the guy who was telling him what to do and saying, hey, this is how you do it, this is how you do it, you just load it and I'll shoot it. He was kind of like, no, I got this. And so he stood up, he stepped up at that time, even though he didn't have that experience and that training, and he was shooting down Japanese planes. He shot down at least 2 Japanese planes that day. And it was, I think such a huge example of him stepping up to the plate, not being comfortable, but, defending his life and the life of those around him. And not only that, he helped, there was lots of people that were wounded, that he helped them, and he helped, get several people to safety. And so he was eventually awarded the Navy Cross, which is, he was the first black African-American to be awarded the Navy Cross. And he was a big hero, especially for the African-American community at that time. And I think that he was actually on a war bond tour to kind of, strike up, get people to donate or buy war bonds
so for the military.
Yeah, kind of like Captain America, I guess,
Exactly like Captain America was doing.
But, there were, it was a difficult time in American history where, African Americans weren't treated the same in the military, and they were kind of disrespected. Well, they were disrespected. They were. I mean, and so there was a lot of back and forth where the people were like, oh, he stood up and saved his country, and all you did was give him a mop. They gave him, after that, you just give him a mop to go do his duty, do his job again. And so there was this, I think that is really where the tides started to turn. You talk about, at that time, like Jackie Robinson,
baseball, yeah.
And Doris Miller and some of these other guys. That's where the tide started to turn, I think, where people are like, opinions maybe started to change, hopefully. Well, I think eventually, yeah. Then I think that really took place in Vietnam, where I think a lot of hearts changed because you didn't have these segregated platoons anymore. You actually had mixed platoons, and these guys came back from the war, and they were like,
Yeah, I've been elbow deep in blood and guts with these guys. And
they're just brothers right along with you.
Yeah, and I'm sure it's hard to be feel a certain way against someone who is almost like your brother, and is there in the thick of everything, and he sacrifices his life for you, and you sacrifice your life for them.
And then after you go to get a beer or something like that, and then they're like, oh, we don't serve these guys, and you're like, are you kidding me? Like, this guy was...
Yeah, whenever you get home and you're like, this guy's done more for this country than you would ever know.
Yeah, exactly. So it's just interesting how that turned. So I just think it was great to honor him and that sacrifice. And I liked his story specifically because he stepped outside of his comfort zone to protect his country and himself and his fellow soldiers in a time of desperate need. And
cool.
Pretty cool.
Yeah, going above and beyond the line of duty. So I like that. One of the stories that I had looked into was he was a helicopter pilot, and this specific story happened in Vietnam. But so this man, his name was Ed Freeman. So just imagine this. Imagine you're a 19-year-old kid. You've been shot. You're in a battle in Vietnam. You're critically wounded. You're laying on the jungle floor, bleeding out, and you're dying. It's the Battle of Ia Drang, the Ia Drang Valley. It's one of the largest battles in Vietnam that we were in. Let's say your unit is outnumbered 8-1 against the enemy, who is constantly firing. Seems like they have unlimited stores of ammunition. They're firing at you from 100 or 200 yards away, so like one football field, shooting, just laying down AK-47 rounds at you, right?
Wow.
You know that your own infantry, so that you're the infantry, and the landing zone was so hot that the commanders had ordered that all of the medevac helicopters stop coming in. They said, it's too dangerous. We can't have any medevac helicopters coming in. They said, we just can't do it. So you're just stuck. I
So
mean,
if you get shot, it's a death sentence, basically.
yeah. I mean, imagine you're this guy shot, laying in the bottom of the jungle, and you hear over the radio, "No more medevac helicopters. It's too dangerous." And you're like, "Well, I am screwed." Right?
Yeah.
I'm getting shot at. I'm probably going to get shot again, and there's no help coming because the landing zone is too hot. So you're lying there, you're listening to the enemy machine guns. You know in the back of your mind you're never going to get out. Your family is 12,000 miles away, and all the way across the world. You know, the whole world probably just starts to kind of fade away. And I can imagine some thoughts of desperation and hopelessness comes into your mind when you're in that type of situation. I have never been in that situation, and I couldn't even pretend to imagine. So you're hearing this machine gun, you're hearing the bullets whizzing over your head. You know that none of the medevacs are coming, that they're all halted, they're all stopped. But there is someone coming. Ed Freeman is coming for you. Right? He's not even a medevac helicopter, and it's not his job to fly in and to medevac people out. But he has an amazing story, and he did one of the most miraculous things and probably one of the most selfless things that I can think of in putting himself in the line of danger. So Ed Freeman, he was actually born in 1927 to a big family, lived on a farm in Mississippi. He joined the Navy in 1944 and actually was in the Pacific Theater during the end of World War II.
Wow.
So he did that. And then once he got out of the military, he went back to school and decided that he wanted to re-enlist. So he re-enlisted, and he enlisted into the Army. And then he served in Korea. And then after the Korean War, he wanted to become a pilot. He's like, I'm going to become a helicopter pilot. And he was 6'4". And they said, dude,
big.
They said, no way. They said, you're not going to. Well, actually, I think he wanted to be just a normal pilot, not specifically a helicopter pilot. And there was regulations on you couldn't be like over, 5'9", or I don't know, whatever the height regulation was.
Because he couldn't fit in the cockpit.
Yeah, the cockpits were smaller. And they told him, you will never fly. But he was persistent and kept on, went to flight school and actually became a pilot. So he became a pilot. When Vietnam rolled around, obviously he was a little bit older, and he was very seasoned. He was really close to retiring. He was only a couple years away from retirement when the Vietnam War broke out. But he was assigned to pilot the 229th Assault Helicopter Battalion, is what he was assigned to, and he was one of the leaders of that battalion. So when this battle ofIen Drang, which was the first major battle that the United States were in with the North Vietnamese, when it started, they came in, and he was one of the pilots that was dropping off troops. So they took in a bunch of troops, and he was dropping them off in his big Huey helicopter, and then he would take off, and so he's basically a troop transport.
Yeah.
And he was transporting troops in his helicopter. Well, once the battle got so bad that they basically said no more medevac helicopters are going in, the men on the ground were, they were struggling to even maintain their defenses. They were running out of ammunition, running out of supplies, running out of medical equipment, and running out of guys to a certain extent. Because they were just being slaughtered. And so back at the base, or the staging area where the helicopters were housed, the Army Major Bruce Crandall called for one volunteer to fly back with him and help him. And Freeman was the only helicopter pilot that raised his hand, that said that I'll go back. And in an interview later, somebody asked him, well, why did you volunteer to go get those guys? And he said, because I was the one that put them there, right? I was the one that dropped them off there and left.
Interesting.
And So for hours on end, Freeman and this other guy, Crandall, flew unarmed helicopters. They were not medevacs, but they flew these unarmed helicopters, and basically landed in this hot landing zone under fire and dropped supplies. And eventually, once they dropped supplies, they ended up starting to haul out wounded soldiers. So he said, I put 14 hours in that day, in and out of that landing zone. And at 10:30 p.m., I made my last landing with some guy helping me by holding a flashlight in the middle of the field. And it was crazy. He ended up making... he went back and forth, so it was interesting. He would fly in a helicopter, and then there were several times where he got back to the headquarters base, and he had to switch helicopters because the helicopter he was flying was too badly damaged that it couldn't make a trip again. So we ended up switching helicopters like 5 or 6 times.
Jeez.
And he ended up making 21 trips back and forth. It dropping supplies, ammunition, water, medicine, everything to the troops that were there, and ended up taking out more than 70 wounded soldiers to safety.
Wow.
And so in the process, actually, this battle of, did you ever see the movie We Were Soldiers? Or We Are Soldiers, I think? We Were Soldiers.
Mel Gibson, right?
Yeah, with Mel Gibson. So
A long time ago, yeah.
that movie is based off of that battle.
Oh, okay.
And I don't think they specifically go into... I can't remember the movie exactly. I don't know if they have this guy in there at all, but he ended up getting the Medal of Honor for actually President Bush gave him the Medal of Honor.
Several years
George
later.
Bush, yeah.
Was
George,
it posthumous? Was it after he died?
No, he ended up dying, I think in like 2002 or something like that, 2006 or something, from Parkinson's.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, complications with Parkinson's.
Wow.
So, he lived, he was old, right? He fought in World War II and then just recently died, less than 20 years ago. So that was just a story that I thought was really cool. And one of the biggest things for me is that he was like maybe not even a year away from retirement. And he was willing to sacrifice himself for, number one, people that maybe he didn't even know, and number two, putting himself in that type of situation where he knew that you're constantly going to get shot at. Now, I have heard the story several times. I think there's a couple different renditions of it to a certain extent. Some details have been changed. The version that I had originally heard said that he had been shot multiple times, in the legs, and the shoulder, and the arm, and had shrapnel from them shooting the glass, and the glass going in his face and stuff like that, and that he had been severely hurt, but that he kept flying. This article that had more detail didn't say that. I like to think that maybe he did.
How do you not?
I wouldn't be surprised.
Jeez.
Let's say that.
Wow. What a crazy story.
So, yeah. People... And it was crazy that he was the only one to volunteer. Now, I don't know how many pilots there were, but I'm pretty sure there was more than one pilot.
I think sometimes it's like they ask for volunteers because nobody wants to get like ordered to their death, It's like they know what was going on over there, and then it's like, hey, you're going to go. And it's like, why me, So they ask for volunteers.
And then if someone, I don't know, maybe it's more on the conscience of,
we ask for volunteers first, and then voluntold somebody, and then next he voluntold somebody.
Yeah. So I don't know. Crazy story, awesome story. The guy that you had shared and this guy, I'd like to think that in that type of situation, I would be the one to, step up and do the right thing. But you know what? A lot of stuff probably goes through your mind. I got kids. I've got a family, or, I don't want to die. I don't know. I can't even pretend to understand the bravery or the loyalty that some of these guys some of these guys have. So
especially when you just volunteer to go do that, because you're already safe, and then you volunteer to go help those guys out.
yeah,
That's I think it's a little bit of a different situation as opposed to like you're in the situation and you're just trying to survive,
for sure. Hey guys, I just wanted to take a quick break and say thank you for listening to this episode and invite you to support us on Patreon. As a loyal supporter, you will get exclusive access to 2 additional episodes per month, which are not released to the public. You can find the link to our Patreon page in the episode description. Let's get back to the show.
Well, the next one is one that Ethan and I both kind of studied, and we both think this guy's so awesome. Ethan's going to introduce him a little bit, and then his Medal of Honor story is so awesome that I was just going to read it here because the details are just so cool that I thought it would be really good just to read through the whole story and get a real sense of what he went through on that day he earned his Medal of Honor, but then also providing the context of what happened to him before that and then after that.
Yeah, so this guy, his name was Roy Benavidez, and they call him the Lazarus Soldier. Lazarus as in like the Bible, Lazarus, like being raised from the dead, right? So he kind of has, the story goes, I mean, he kind of had 3 lives is what they talk about. He kind of, came back from the dead. And so his first life, I guess he was a master sergeant, kind of towards the end of his career, but he was born in Texas to a Mexican father and an Indian mother, Native American mother. Both of his parents actually passed away of tuberculosis before he was 5.
Oh, geez.
Yeah, so him and his brother kind of bounced around. I think they ended up living with some other family members, but came from a very, very poor situation. His dad, when he was alive, he was a sharecropper and was just, they struggled massively. So Roy dropped out of school in 7th grade to start working the farms, picking sugar beets to help basically support his family, to put food on the table. So once he grew up, when he was 17, he figured probably my best future is to join the military. So at 17, he joined the Texas National Guard. And then at 19, he joined the Army. And so while in the Army, he did lots of different things. There was a stint where he was studied training under military police. He was paratrooper. He was just kind of continued to advance and get better and advancing towards more special operations and things like that. So in 1965, he was sent to Vietnam to train the native soldiers there. He was kind of one of the guys that was there making sure that the native soldiers knew what they were doing and had the skills to move forward. So while he was there, he went on what they called it a solo patrol, which most likely means that he was on some sort of kind of covert operation where he was supposed to be gathering intelligence on the North Vietnamese and kind of some of their locations and everything. Well, while he was on that patrol, he stepped on a landmine. And this landmine basically blew him up, and it left him severely wounded. He had severe injuries to his spine, to the point to where he was paralyzed. He couldn't move his legs.
The doctors told him, "You are never going to walk again."
Yeah, so they sent him. They evac him to Texas, where he got medical care, and basically the doctors there, they gave him the news that, look, you'll never walk again, and because of that, we're going to discharge you from the military. And so he knew that he had no life to go back to, and he had a family history of military service. And he basically, to be discharged for him was worse than death.
He did have a wife.
At that point, yes, he did. And so he, the story goes, they told him he'd never walk again. He couldn't move his legs. So in the evening, he would do his normal PT and everything that the doctors the nurses and stuff would give him. But at night, he would kind of sneak off of his bed, and he would crawl across the floor to the nearest wall, and he would kind of get a table or a chair or something. He'd prop himself up against the wall in a standing position. He'd lift himself up, standing on his feet, even though it was excruciatingly painful, and he would stand there as long as he could and just try to wiggle his toes. And that was his whole thing. I just try to wiggle my toes. And so after doing this, he wanted to go back to Vietnam. So he was in this hospital for 9 months. After 9 months, the doctor came and said, "Okay, Roy, here are your discharge papers." He said, "No." He said, "Don't." He said, "I don't want them." He said, "I'm not going to go." And the doctor said, "Okay, well, if you can get up out of that bed and walk out of this room, I will rip these papers up." And he did it. He got up and he walked out. And to the doctor's surprise, I mean, he got up and he walked out. And it was interesting because he's done a lot of motivational speaking and stuff like that since these events happened. But he says that whenever he walked out, he was in excruciating pain. But at that point, that was kind of like his first life. Like he had been, as Lazarus arose from the dead, so did he. He walked out of the grave and he started his second life.
And that was in July of 1966. Yep. He walked out of the hospital with his hospital by his side, determined to return to combat in Vietnam, despite that pain that he had from his wounds. And so what happened next is kind of where the story even more ramps up. So in January of 1968, he returned to South Vietnam. Now, this story is kind of long, but it's really good, so I'm going to read it through. And so he was in the United States Army, and he distinguished himself by a series. This was the Medal of Honor description. Each Medal of Honor recipient has a description of what the act was itself.
I think there has to be like a certain eyewitnesses, and there's certain requirements that have to go into it.
And then so this was, I think, what because Ronald Reagan's the one that gave it to him. So I think this is what he read. And so he was assigned to the detachment B-56 5th Special Forces Group Airborne, 1st Special Forces, Republic of Vietnam. So on the morning of May 2nd, 1968, a 12-man Special Forces reconnaissance team was inserted by helicopters of the 240th Assault Helicopter Company in a dense jungle area west of Loc Ninh, Vietnam, to gather intelligence information about confirmed large-scale enemy activity. This area was controlled and routinely patrolled by the North Vietnamese Army. After a short period of time on the ground, the team met heavy enemy resistance and requested emergency extraction. 3 helicopters attempted extraction, but were unable to land due to the intense enemy small arms and anti-aircraft fire. So these guys are pinned down. Sergeant Benavidez was at the forward operating base, or the FOB, in Loc Ninh, monitoring the operation by radio. When these helicopters of the 240th Assault Helicopter Company returned to offload wounded crew members and to assess aircraft damage, Sergeant Benavidez voluntarily, which is cool, just like the last one, boarded a returning aircraft to assist in another extraction attempt. Realizing that all the team members were either dead or wounded and unable to move to the pickup zone, he directed the aircraft to a nearby clearing where he jumped from the helicopter and ran approximately 75 meters under withering small arms fire to the crippled team.
So I'm going to add in one thing here too, is that actually one of the guys that was pinned down and that was there was a man that had saved Roy's life several months before this. They were like dangling from a helicopter, and the rope that they were dangling from had like broken, and this guy had saved Roy's life.
Oh, really?
From falling off from falling to his death. And so Roy had noticed that this guy was one of the guys that was pinned down, and that was one of the reasons why he volunteered too.
Oh.
So that's kind of cool. But
Cool,
yeah, I mean, he
yeah.
straight up volunteered. He just jumped on the helicopter and was like, "I'm
Let's go.
going."
Yeah.
Yeah.
It says, prior to reaching the team's position, he was wounded in his right leg, face, and head. Despite these painful injuries, he took charge in repositioning the team members and directing their fire to facilitate the landing of an extraction aircraft and the loading of wounded and dead team members. He then threw smoke canisters to direct the aircraft to the team's position. Despite his severe wounds and under intense enemy fire, he carried and dragged half of the wounded team, which was, I think, a Team 12, it said, members to the awaiting aircraft. He then provided protective fire by running alongside the aircraft as it moved to pick up the remaining team members. As the enemy fire intensified, he hurried to recover the body and classified documents on the dead team leader. When he reached the leader's body, Sergeant Benavidez was severely wounded by small arms fire in the abdomen and grenade fragments in his back.
So he was shot in the stomach.
And grenaded in the back.
And grenaded in the back.
Crazy. This is why I'm reading this, because all these details are so cool. At nearly the same moment, the aircraft pilot was mortally wounded and his helicopter crashed. Although in extremely critical condition due to his multiple wounds, Sergeant Benavidez secured the classified documents and made his way back to the wreckage, where he aided the wounded out of the overturned aircraft and gathered the stunned survivors into a defensive perimeter. Under increasing enemy automatic weapons and grenade fire, he moved around the perimeter, distributing water and ammunition to his weary men, reinstilling in them a will to live and fight. Facing a buildup of enemy opposition with a beleaguered team, Sergeant Benavidez mustered his strength and began calling in tactical airstrikes and directed the fire from supporting gunships to support the enemy's, to suppress the enemy's fire and so permit another extraction attempt. Now it says he was wounded again in his thigh by small arms fire while administering first aid to a wounded team member, just before another extraction helicopter was able to land. His indomitable spirit kept him going as he began to ferry his comrades to the craft. On his second trip with the wounded, he was clubbed from behind by an enemy soldier. In the ensuing hand-to-hand combat, so this part is interesting. One of the enemy soldiers accosted him and basically stabbed him with a bayonet. Benavidez pulled it out, yanked out his own knife, and stabbed the guy, and then just kept going and left the knife in the guy, and just left him and kept going. So he suddenly he sustained additional wounds to his head and arms before killing the adversary. So he tussled with this guy hand to hand
after getting clubbed in the back of the head with a
and then
rifle
stabbed with the guy's bayonet. He took the bayonet out, took his own knife, stabbed the guy, killed the guy, and kept going. As he then continued under devastating fire to carry the wounded to the helicopter. Upon reaching the aircraft, he spotted and killed 2 enemy soldiers who were rushing the craft from an angle that prevented the aircraft door gunner from firing upon them. With little strength remaining, he made one last trip to the perimeter to ensure all classified material had been collected or destroyed and to bring in the remaining wounded. Only then, in extremely serious condition from numerous wounds and loss of blood, did he allow himself to be pulled into the extraction aircraft. Sergeant Benavidez' gallant choice to join voluntarily his comrades who were in the critical straits, to expose himself constantly to withering enemy fire, and his refusal to stop despite numerous severe wounds, saved the lives of at least 8 men. His fearless personal leadership, tenacious devotion to duty, and extremely valorous actions in the face of overwhelming odds were in keeping with the highest traditions of military service and reflect the utmost credit on him and the United States military.
So that was his Medal of Honor paper.
Yeah, that was
why he got the Medal of Honor.
Yeah, that was how he got that Medal of Honor.
Yeah.
And then so tell about what
happened.
So
he gets in this chopper and they fly back to the forward operating base, where they have doctors and medical and everybody there. So basically they start sifting through the people that are coming out of these helicopters and putting them in piles, almost like these people are critical, these people are dead, and these people need to go and get medical attention right now. And he was actually, so he had been, his eyes. So basically, the story was he was laying there and he had closed his eyes, and blood had coagulated and crusted into his eyes, and so he couldn't open his eyes. And his jaw was broken. And obviously, he had severe blood loss and other stuff, and so they actually sorted him into the pile of deceased.
Yeah.
And basically, they go through and they start putting them in body bags, and they check them, and then put them in body bags. Well, one of his men or someone that knew him,
maybe that his buddy,
yeah,
hey,
recognized him and said, "That is Roy. Go check him." And the doctor went over there and checked him, checked for breathing, checked his pulse, all that kind of stuff. And the doctor said, he's gone. There's nothing I can do for him.
Yeah.
And then so he started to zip up the body bag, and Roy spit in the doctor's face.
Yeah.
And it was interesting. I mean,
your medical license should be revoked.
Yeah. Well, the thing is, too, is I don't think he spit in his face to be like
just to tell him he was alive.
Yeah. So basically, he spit at him to tell him he was alive because he couldn't speak. His jaw was broken, and he could hear them talking. And he was like, "They just pronounced me dead. I got to do something to whatever." And so he had previously had this back injury. Maybe he was paralyzed to a certain extent again. And so I don't even know. But basically when he did that, they said, "Oh, this guy's alive. Let's go. Let's take him in." And they took him in. And so he spent a year in the hospital recovering.
Another year.
Another year. Well, the first one was 9 months.
Oh.
He spent a year in the hospital recovering from his wounds.
Wow.
And so it was. The story of him getting the Medal of Honor was actually really kind of interesting because first off, he got, I think it's called the Distinguished Cross or something like that for valor. And that's a much quicker process. And so his commanding officer had applied to get him that before because he thought he was going to die. And he wanted to do it while he was alive. And so he got that, but then he recovered, and then years later he actually ended up getting the Medal of Honor. You said I think Reagan gave it to him?
Yeah, he did.
So that was his second life, right? I mean, at this point this guy's lived 2 lives. He's come back from the dead. He's Lazarus, right? He's come back twice. And so going into his third life is really interesting. He ended up getting out of the military. He went back to school, and studied and basically had a career and everything else. But because of his injuries, he was actually considered like almost 100% disabled, and he got disability benefits from the military. And so it's really interesting because he kind of became an advocate for soldiers receiving disability benefits, because there was a lot of soldiers, and at this time, I guess the VA or whatever else, it just wasn't really put together very well, and you had all these guys coming back with all kinds of illnesses, whether it's from Agent Orange or whatever else they were using,
PTSD, which wasn't even recognized really back then.
PTSD that they didn't really know everything that was coming from it, and plus these guys were coming back to a country that was calling them, baby killers and all this kind of stuff. And so, not everybody, but a lot of people were. I don't know if you ever seen Forrest Gump. It's just like that.
Yeah.
But so he came back and basically he became an advocate. And there was actually at one point, for some reason, he no longer qualified for his military benefits, and so he temporarily lost them or something like that, and then he petitioned for him and he got his benefits back, and it was just this whole long ordeal that kind of went back and forth, and he basically went around. He became a motivational speaker, and he would talk with schools and colleges and anybody who was willing to hear not only his story, but he would share the stories of valor from all of his experiences. I just thought that was really cool. A guy who, he had some great quotes that basically was, to sum up his words to a certain extent is, I was just doing what I was supposed to do. I was doing what anybody else would do. So I don't know if you're doing what anybody else would do, but
that dude's like a tank, man.
Yeah, you did what you did. I mean, it's like, this is like the John Wick of Vietnam.
Yeah, incredible valor. Also, you think about, he had full disability benefits, and yet he was like, no, he's that unconquerable spirit that he had within him to be like, I'm going to go out,
going.
I'm going to go to school, I'm going to do this, I'm going to make something of my life. I'm not just going to be a disabled vet the rest of my life. And that was the same spirit that helped him recover from the first time. Such a cool, someone who, he's American Indian, Mexican guy, or at least that was his heritage, and he came from nothing, and he just, showed his true colors. And I think that, a lot of people, sometimes most unexpected person, they show their true colors, and in a moment like that, they can really shine. Also, I think in some sense you have to be a little bit crazy to.
Yeah. So it was interesting. So his nickname, right? He got to choose his own nickname, and his basically his call sign was Tango Mike Mike, which is TMM. And he got to choose it, and it stood for the Mean Mexican.
Nice.
Yeah, Tango Mike Mike. That was his call sign over the radio. Tango Mike Mike, the Mean Mexican, TMM.
That's so cool.
Yeah, and so it was just, I don't know, that's a great story. And, I think looking back at these stories, these are all great stories. There are so many of these stories. And I think there's a lot of people that do extremely valiant things that don't
get Medal of Honor.
That don't receive the Medal of Honor.
Totally. There's many unsung heroes that we'll never know about that
100%
sacrificed, so much that we'll never even know.
Yeah, and so, just a thank you to all veterans out there, all active duty and
those who
retired,
remembering that were fallen. Everyone that's fallen. This is kind of a tribute that we wanted to give, and we're appreciative, and as a thank you, we appreciate it. Yeah. Thankful for all of our freedoms, and I hope you guys have a great Memorial Day weekend, and you think about this, and hopefully this kind of inspires you, motivates you to have that valor and courage in your own lives, and also kind of gives you a little bit of a wake-up call on the sacrifices that were made for you. So,
yeah, for me, I'm just going to add something too. For me, it's motivational, right? I mean, these people did things that were completely almost inhuman, the things that they did. And so I think that speaks to the capability that we have as humans to overcome challenges. And in this case, maybe it's physical, mental, spiritual, every type of challenge. But we can overcome things in our life too. We can be our own heroes. We can be heroes of our family. We can be heroes for our children. We can make the right decisions. We can work our butts off and become the best that we can be for the heritage of our own family and the legacy that we can leave for them too. So absolutely.
Well, this has been great. Thank you guys so much for listening. We appreciate it. If you don't follow us already on Instagram, please do so. Also, we're on YouTube, and if you can, please leave us a rating on wherever you listen to podcasts. Just maybe a rating and a comment that you'd like to show. That helps. That goes a long way, and lets a lot of others know about our show. So we appreciate that, and we hope you have a good weekend, and let's build that creed together.
All right, let's do it.